In terms of the authorization to use military force, in terms of changing the War Powers Resolution, Tim McCain and John McCain is actually pretty phenomenal. So John McCain is a right-wing hawk, and he does think that Trump and Obama and all these, folks has authority to bomb whom the fuck ever for any reason at any time. But as a congressman, he also understands his power. So Tim McCain's been trying for more than 2 years to get Congress to consider a formal authorization for the use of military force in the struggle against the Islamic State. And it looks like his effort is about to become a Senate Armed Services Committee priority. Then you have John McCain, who says, Senator McCain, I very much appreciate your advocacy on this whole issue, that you have been sometimes a voice in the wilderness in this, and you've also been absolutely correct. Certainly Congress has not exercised authorization for the use of military force against the 9/11 terrorists. That's how it's fucking written. It is remarkably short, and they also quote the War Powers Act. So you have here that there's been citations in law, and it said that the Supreme Court said that the authorization to use military force could not be used for military tribunals at Guantanamo Bay. So that means the authorization to use force, there's two of them. There's the 2001, the immediate one, the one right after, and then there's the 2002, which is the Iraq War. That's what usually the War on Terror and the Iraq War. But I think that we need to pay attention to this much closer. So the authorization to use force, it just says that we go after the 9/11. It says very specifically, Section 1, short title, this joint resolution may be cited as the authorization for the use of military force. Section 2, authorization for use of United States Armed Forces. A, in general, that the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations and organizations or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons. So only the 9/11 terrorists. Anybody associated with the 9/11 terrorists, that's who we were going to go attack, and that's it. That's it. It was also interesting, it said that anyone he determines. So if Hillary was elected, she doesn't get this, does she? Because it says he. Between the two of them, the 2001 authorization to use military force and 2002 authorization to use military force against Iraq, right? War on Terror, Iraq War authorizations. The AUMF is how it's initialed. Between the two of them, that has justified every single fucking invasion and attack and bombing that so far. So we're in 20 to 33 African countries right now. Right? We got a fucking shadow war going on. How many, countries are we invading? Nobody fucking knows. That's exactly how we got stuck in Vietnam, right? Eisenhower sprinkled just a few, and then Truman did, and then JFK, then LBJ, and then, now there's 4 million dead Vietnamese. So just by starting with a little bit, just a couple of them, and then we don't even know what the fuck Trump is doing. Trump is spreading, our imperialism all over the fucking place. So we're, snaking through Africa right now, and we have no idea. Authorization to use military force in 2001 has been used in order to justify the NSA surveillance. So because, this fuck, oh my God. So because we're going after the 9/11 terrorists, there might be a 9/11 terrorist that are associated all of them are dead. All of them, they all came out of fucking Saudi Arabia. So why are we basically wiretapping the entire, nation of over 300 million people? We're wiretapping everybody, listening to their phone calls, reading all their emails, in order to go after these 9/11 terrorists. There's 2 points I want to make, too, about and then about the language that was removed. So there was some language that gave Bush the power to deter and preempt any future acts of terrorism or aggression against the U.S. To deter or preempt, and preempt. Were members of Congress that thought that language had give Bush a blank check to go anywhere, anytime against anyone Bush wanted to, or any subsequent administration deemed capable of carrying out an attack. So therefore, to deter and preempt was taken out. To preempt, we can invade nations in order to preempt the terrorism from happening. And it's very specific. It's aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the U.S. by those nations, organizations, or persons. Anybody and everybody, whoever the fuck this Al-Qaeda is. Oh yeah, the CIA created Al-Qaeda. The CIA created Al-Qaeda. It only started out about 100 members, right? So Ronald Reagan has given all that, those guns to bin Laden. And then now Al-Qaeda is one of the most popular fucking organizations all across. The argument for why this 2001 authorization to use military force didn't apply to Obama and it didn't apply to Trump is because it says he determines planned. It says he. Well, he is one specific person. It is Bush. This was written right after 9/11. This is September 14th, 3 days after 9/11. And now the authorization to use military force, this is justifying every fucking invasion that the president feels like, is somehow tied to terrorism. Or they just want to steal the, natural resources of all these different countries. There's also War Powers Resolution requirements. It says it's consistent with Section 8A1 of the War Powers Resolution, and then they mention Section 5B of the War Powers Resolution. So they mentioned the War Powers so short. In the very beginning, you have the reasons 9/11 happened and we need to defend ourselves, blah, blah, blah. And then it says short title. This joint resolution may be cited as the authorization for use of military force. And then Section 2, I've already read the whole thing, but I'm going to read it again because of, the War Powers clause at the end, okay? So, A, in general, that the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the U.S. by such nations, organizations, or persons. War Power Resolution requirements. 1. Specific statutory authorization. Consistent with Section 8A1 of the War Powers Resolution, the Congress declares that this section is intended to constitute specific statutory authorization within the meaning of Section 5B of the War Powers Resolution. Last sentence. 2. Applicability of other requirements. Nothing in this resolution supersedes any requirement of the War Powers Resolution. Speaker of the House of Representatives and Vice President and President of the Senate. So everybody, signed it. That's what they're saying. Okay, so I would have actually been able to read that if I didn't waste talking, 15 seconds to begin with. But that's the whole thing. That's the whole fucking bill. This is amazing. I saw you had, that one dude brag about only 3 pages. All my laws are just going to be 3 pages. Anybody at their houses can, easily read it and understand it. This is remarkably simple. The simplicity of this is, amazing. So even though they took out the to deter and preempt future acts, this is what this law has been used for. To preempt war against Iraq. I guess we had the Iraq resolution too, but to preempt anywhere. In Yemen and Sudan. Only congressperson brave enough to vote against war, blank check, for war was Barbara Lee. The only one. The only one. Bernie Sanders voted for the authorization, the 2001, the authorization to use military force. Bernie Sanders voted for the legislation that got us the NSA wiretapping. Bernie Sanders got the Patriot Act, came out of this authorization to use military force. There are the Patriot Act provisions. The NSA said, the authorization to use military force. We're allowed to fucking spy on American citizens because they could be associated with the 9/11 terrorists. They're all dead. Every single one of the 9/11 terrorists are dead. And then 15 of them are from Saudi Arabia. So if really, who financed them, right? I think we should. What country provided the 9/11 terrorists? No wonder Saudi Arabia. John McCain on Thursday, this is an article, this year of April by The Hill, it says that John McCain argued that President Trump has the authority to carry out, airstrikes in Syria, but he says we need an authorization for use of military force. We got to update it, we got to make it realistic, and we got to have Congress, the representatives of the American people, involved in some of these decisions. All the decisions. You're supposed to declare the fucking war, John McCain. You're supposed to declare the damn war. You're supposed to offer reprisals and marks, and then finance, the Army and the Navy. There's a whole Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8 tells you all the powers that you got, okay? John McCain, you need to check out the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution says you declare the wars, and then it also says that you can give out marks and reprisals. It also says you can, same clause, Clause 11, the War Powers Clause, it says that, John McCain, you can write the rules of prisoners of war. He was a prisoner of war in land and in the sea, and I assume in air. I don't know if you can capture anybody in the air. That'd be hard. A big net, catch a whole plane. So, John McCain, that's the powers you have. Check out Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It tells you all the powers that Congress has. They got a shit ton of power. A shit ton of power. So he's talking about working with Tim Kaine in order to try to come up with a new authorization to use military force. So, but then McCain's like, Trump doesn't really need to ask. Nah, he already has approval. And he says that Ronald Reagan had attacked Libya's Muammar Gaddafi in 1986. And so I guess everybody's just allowed to bomb. Donald Trump is doing the deep state's bidding. They don't want to get rid of him. He's bombing the fuck out of everybody, right? Mother of all bombs. Basically, we're being fed this shit. We're not rebelling. People are not mad about the war. It's like it's become commonplace. Generation Y has absolutely fucking failed. They're worse than the hippies, and I cannot let the millennials down. So Generation Y, Jonathan Masters here speaking up. I used to think I was the oldest of the millennials. I turned 18 in the year 2000. So that was when my adulthood began, in 2000. But apparently I'm it makes sense actually that I'm Generation Y. Millennial means you were born after, right, 2000. And it's 17, so there's going to be adults, There could be some adults that were born after, and then we're definitely... I didn't grow up with Pokemon. I grew up with Power Rangers, Rescue Rangers. So fucking Trump. Fucking Trump knows that he needs congressional approval. He tweeted in 2013 that Obama needs congressional approval. What will we get for bombing Syria besides more debt and a possible long-term conflict? Trump tweeted. 2013, so for 4 fucking years. He knows this shit. He knows he needs to get congressional approval. Trump, something about Bashar Assad. He goes, I guess he's running things, so I guess something should happen. It's very dark and ominous. 2002, authorization to use military force in the 2001. So the Iraq War. And the War on Terror vote, which is the first authorization to use military force, that very short law that I read, and then the 2002 authorization to use military force, which eventually, it was the October vote, and in March we invaded. So there's actually a bunch of senators here. McCain, Tim Kaine, Rubio, and Murphy introduced resolution on the 6th anniversary of the Syrian War. This is mccain.senate.gov. Murphy is quoted as saying that we need to debate an authorization for the war against ISIL in Syria, and we must work with our international allies to combat terrorism and provide refuge. So here's what I like about them calling for the vote. Vote for it. Yes. Let's see if the American people will go ahead with another authorization to use military force. One of these fucking bills that allow the government to have war for 15 years with no end in sight. Right? So they took out that language because they didn't want it to seem like it was a blank check, but it has been a blank check. Who's associated with the 9/11 terrorists? Anybody that is the president's enemy. Anybody and everybody. Who the fuck cares? Trump. Just trust Trump. A year and a half after Tim Kaine got into the Senate, he started, shaking things up. He wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, and he's sitting there saying that President Obama has said that May 2013 he would work with Congress to update the 2001 authorization for the use of military force. So Tim Kaine is talking about it being updated. John McCain says that Trump has all the authorization that he needs. John McCain wants this authorization to use military force vote to happen so that way Trump can bomb with impunity forever and ever. John McCain's getting a little bit nervous. I don't know Tim Kaine's fucking background. Is he an imperialist too? Old fucking John McCain wants to bomb the shit out of everybody. How come we don't have any anti-war Democrats? I bet you Tim McCain wants to further basically justify, get the, authorization to use force. Now we're allowed to bomb Syria. Now it's not illegal. He writes in the op-ed, I believe the president must come to Congress for authority to initiate any U.S. military action in Iraq. He said that June 2014. Eventually, Obama did try to get this passed, failed, but still said, I got the power to bomb whoever the fuck I want to bomb anyways. So what you going to do about it? Yeah, he tried to re-update it, tried to get it passed again. Bernie was like, I'm not supporting it this time. So apparently not all Democrats get his support, but he was on board with Bush's in 2001 and 2002. These are the two authorizations. These are the two legal documents that continue, that carry on, that Trump can use as a foundation. Why were you bombing Uganda? Why were you in Somalia? Why did the Navy SEAL die in Somalia? Why are we have boots on the ground? We started a Somalian war. We've been in 33 fucking African nations. We started 33 fucking wars. That's what the 33 wars on top of the 7 wars that we've already started. Say here, this is the Atlantic.com, another 6 months before Obama would actually ask Congress for a new AUMF, a request that came long after he began dropping bombs in Iraq and Syria. And, of course, Tim McCain's continued to push. I think Tim McCain is an imperialist piece of shit. I think he's trying to, he's trying to feel important, right? Give Congress more of that authority. But he's a John McCain. He's allying himself with John McCain. Marco Rubio, is a sycophant. I don't know about that other guy. But Marco Rubio wants to bomb everybody, right? He wants to just, John McCain to like him. So he'll go ahead and be like, yeah, sure, bomb Uganda. And I think Uganda, that's where the King's Army is, right? With that one, God, it was that big thing with the guy start jerking off in the Coney movement, okay? It was Coney. Coney was this bad fucking warlord, the King's Army, the Lord's Army or some shit in Uganda, and he's going around terrorizing everybody or some shit. That video came out, everybody all of a sudden started saying, get Coney, but then later on, we didn't even know if he was still in the country. We didn't even know if he was still in Uganda. You got Boko Haram, so that's a horrible fucking terrorist organization. The Save Our Girls campaign came after they had kidnapped over 100 to 200 girls, local girls, and then they basically got online and was like mocking everybody, like, yeah, we're Al-Qaeda, yeah, we're ISIS, we're whatever the fuck, the boogeyman that you want us to be, and it's our right to steal these girls and sell them off, as slaves. So that's brazen, and they get online and they were saying this shit, and so that was pretty, if we're going after Boko Haram, good, but I'm just supposed to trust that Trump is just doing. As I'm very clear when it comes to the American empire, I do wonder sometimes if the world wants us to lead, okay? If the world wants us to lead, I once heard that Africans had, George W. Bush had an 80% approval rating from Africans, and that they were naming their kids after him and shit, so Africans loved George Bush. And so I wonder if it was just because, like, he was a go-getter, he, did what he wanted, and perhaps that's what some of the world wants the United States to do. When it comes to war, why can't we do it? Well, the United Nations is kind of corrupt anyways. It also gives us more power than the rest of the world. We got veto power, but the United Nations, give them, cede that authority. We cannot declare war on anybody unless the entire world agrees through the United Nations. That's the only time we'll use force. And I don't think that'd be hard to actually, Tim Kaine studied a 2007 report issued while he was governor by a bipartisan commission at the University of Virginia's Miller Center, and those recommendations, a part of that 2007 report, became the basis for legislation he introduced with Senator John McCain in 2013 to revise the 1973 law. So the War Powers Resolution of 1973, Tim McCain is reading into it, and he's basically saying that the resolution authorizing the war against ISIS had came from a genuine belief that Congress's responsibility was to weigh in, from a constitutional and a moral standpoint. But that's it. So basically he's just saying, hey, Congress is supposed to have war powers. But it's okay. Nah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, Trump. Go ahead. You're breaking the law, but it's okay. Interesting, Hillary Clinton says that she agrees with Senator Tim Kaine that if we're serious about confronting ISIS, Congress ought to express its resolve to stand behind our military and win this fight by passing a new AUMF. And she's publicly applauded Kaine's efforts. So, express its resolve, stand behind our military, win this fight. She is saying that she's in favor of the new authorization to use military force, the same fucking reason that John McCain wants to use the authorization to use military force. So that way they have more legal fucking framework, more of a legal basis to declare war on the entire world. To keep the war machine power apparatus that has encircled the globe. Donald Trump has unleashed terrorism, has unleashed fascism, fascist terrorism all across the world. There and think about, well, what were the countries that we were bombing before? So apparently that's the legal fucking basis. If we bombed your country before, we'll probably bomb it again. You know, we bombed your country, nobody fucking invaded us, nobody said shit to us about, not bombing that country. Well, then apparently, the rest of the world probably don't love you, right? Russia don't love fucking Yemen, right? Russia's, sticking its neck out for Syria, not Yemen. Not Sudan, not Somalia, not Afghanistan, not Pakistan. And China, they're all just kind of like, it's a superpower. We're the number one superpower. We're claiming world hegemony. We got past the United Nations, so we're the fucking empire. We're the fucking empire. There's no, I can't even believe I'm arguing with anybody that would say, no, we're just a republic. The fuck if we are. We're 900 military bases, 150 different countries, and if we're not an empire, then there's never been an empire. You want me to just trust that all these 33 new wars in Africa that Donald Trump is unleashing, I'm just supposed to trust? He's going after all the Boko Harams. He's not going and finding new countries so he can put his fucking hotels up so Ivanka can get some more donations from, so that the children can continue declaring business all across the fucking world. They're looking to profit. They're looking to make as much fucking money for themselves. That's what CEOs and their fucking kids do. They're business assholes. Their business ties should be fucking severed. This is such bullshit. This is so nuts. It go against the emoluments clause, but we've been bribing our fucking politicians for quite some time with donations, legalized bribes. So there's a lot of shit that's fucked up, okay? I don't trust that Trump, he's bombing all these fucking nations, all these countries. We bombed Pakistan, Sudan, so there's 7 official ones, but then there's 33 secret wars. It's secret because when, we only found out about Somalia after that SEAL, that, U.S. Navy SEAL died. So only once the bombs have, landed and people start talking about it, that's only when we get wind of what the fuck is going on. After the rest of the world says something and then somebody believes what they're saying. So that's incredible. It's absolutely, every single war that we're in right now is secret. Because we've only said we're going after the 9/11 perpetrators and then the Iraq war, so we can only be in Iraq. So what are we doing in Syria, legally, if you want to use those authorization to use military force? One was against terror, right, just terrorism, the tactic of terror, or the 9/11 terrorists specifically. So the war against the 9/11 perpetrators, I think that's a better fucking, it was right after 9/11, that was a specific point to it. You can't use that to the Iraq war vote, which is, lie and bullshit, but we got a big-ass embassy. Obama was, pulling out, right? I thought we got out of Afghanistan and Iraq, but apparently the combat troops only came out, but the other half, Rachel Maddow made a big, huge-ass ordeal about it. Look, there is a change in policy. Is there? So Obama couldn't pull out of the goddamn wars, and then he found other new wars in order to get to. And then if we've already been bombing them, then we're going to bomb them again because, apparently the legal jurisdiction of right by conquest, we started bombing you first. This is our country to bomb for as long as we fucking feel like. You got to get a declaration of war for all this shit. We haven't been doing that. They're using this 2001, 2002, and apparently there's an opinion out there. It's a very narrow opinion, and it's wrong, but that the Constitution allows the commander-in-chief to declare war whenever the fuck they feel like it, whenever it's at his pleasure, right? Mr. Cocaine staying up all night with tweeting, he can bomb whoever, whenever. Go up to Jack Goldsmith Smith, who's a Henry L. Shattuck professor at Harvard Law School, co-founder of Lawfare and some other shit. He says the 2002 Iraq authorization to use military force almost certainly authorizes the president to use force today in Iraq, and it might authorize the use of force in Syria. So this is unbelievable. Eventually, the Obama administration says that, the 2002 authorization to use war is no longer used for government activities. This is in June. So in June of 2014, the White House said the 2002 authorization to use force in Iraq, that was gone. We no longer use it. The reason why this is coming up, because they were dropping bombs in Syria against ISIS. And they're like, hey, President, what's your legal justification? It's amazing actually how these administrations treat the press, right? So Obama goes ahead and orders a bunch of military strikes in Syria against ISIS, did it unilaterally. He was supposed to be the one that helps, pull out of Iraq, but eventually, when they ask him for legal justification, he's going to use the 2002 authorization also. So he's like, the 2001 authorization, and if you want to be specific, the 2002 authorization too, because we haven't repealed it yet. We said that it was, repealed. We said we weren't going to use it, but it hasn't been completely repealed. We still kind of need it. So it's incredible. Basically, Obama drops bombs, and then the media is like, hey, you can't do that. That's illegal. And Obama's like, well, I'll give you some legal can you wait 2 weeks or a month or so? Okay. He waits months, and then eventually he releases it out. Yeah, so you know what I said before? I'm not saying this. So a problem with the authorization to use force, the 2001 one, because it says to go after Al-Qaeda, right? After the affiliates, whoever is affiliated with the 9/11 terrorists, those special 19 guys, everybody surrounding those 19 guys, we can declare war on, right? And so whoever Al-Qaeda is, but apparently in 2014, ISIS and Al-Qaeda broke up. They divorced. They broke up. And so even though ISIS is a horrible terrorist, they're not associated with Al-Qaeda, right? So the CIA's Al-Qaeda just did not appeal to ISIS at all. They've gone with their own terrorist network. And so because of that divorce, the 2001 authorization to use force was against Al-Qaeda, so therefore it's not against ISIS. So there's a problem with, his justification bombing Syria with both, those authorizations. Here's the 2002 authorization to use military force against Iraq, whereas blah, 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 Saddam sucks, Saddam sucks, Saddam sucks. Short title. This joint resolution may be cited as the authorization for the use of military force against Iraq Resolution of 2002. Section 2, support for the United States diplomatic efforts. The Congress of the United States supports the efforts by the President to, 1, strictly enforce through the United Nations Security Council all relevant Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq and encourages him in those efforts, and 2, obtain prompt and decisive action by the Security Council to ensure that Iraq abandons its strategy of delay, evasion, and non-compliance and promptly and strictly complies with all relevant Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq. Oh, so we're going through the Security Council? Through the United Nations? Section 3, authorization for use of United States Armed Forces. A, authorization. The President is authorized to use the armed forces of the United States as he determines to be necessary and appropriate in order to, 1, defend the national security of the United States against the continuing threat posed by Iraq, and 2, enforce all relevant UN Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq. B, presidential determination in connection with the exercise of the authority granted in subsection A to use force. The President shall, prior to such exercise or as soon thereafter as may be feasible, but no later than 48 hours after exercising such authority, make available to the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the President pro tempore of the Senate his determination that, 1, reliance by the U.S. on further diplomatic or other peaceful means alone either A, will not adequately protect the national security of the U.S. against the continuing threat posed by Iraq, or B, will not likely to lead to enforcement of all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq, and 2, acting pursuant to this joint resolution is consistent with the U.S. and other countries continuing to take the necessary actions against international terrorists and terrorist organizations, including those nations, organizations, or persons who planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001. See War Powers Resolution requirements. 1. Specific statutory authorization. Consistent with Section 8A1 of the War Powers Resolution, the Congress declares that this section is intended to constitute specific statutory authorization within the meaning of Section 5B of the War Powers Resolution. 2. Applicability of other requirements. Nothing in this joint resolution supersedes any requirement of the War Powers Resolution. Same language that the 2001 authorization to use military force used. Section 4, reports to Congress. A, reports. The President shall at least once every 60 days submit to the Congress a report on matters relevant to this joint resolution, including actions taken pursuant to the exercise of authority granted in Section 3 and the status of planning for efforts that are expected to be required after such actions are completed, including those actions described in Section 7 of the Iraq Liberation Act of 1998. B, single consolidated report. To the extent that the submission of any report described in subsection A coincides with the submission of any other report on matters relevant to this joint resolution otherwise required to be submitted to Congress pursuant to the reporting requirements of the War Powers Resolution, Public Law 93-148. All such reports may be submitted as a single consolidated report to the Congress. See Rule of Construction. To the extent that the information required by Section 3 of the Authorization for Use of Military Force Against Iraq Resolution, Public Law 102-1, is included in the report required by this section, such report shall be considered as meeting the requirements of Section 3 of such resolution. So there's a couple things interesting there. They're sitting there saying that every 60 days the President has to submit to Congress a report about the war in Iraq, so that sort of covers the War Powers Resolution requirement every 60 days, so he's kind of getting an authorization every 60 days. Also interesting about how there was two people that he needs to talk to. The War Powers Resolution forces him to talk to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, so that's Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan is a part of these four, the fucking war operations, and then the President pro tempore of the Senate is Orrin Hatch.